Did that do anything? Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Excellent. Welcome everyone to this virtual community meeting to discuss NPA 2023-0020.02. If you haven't done so already, if you could put your name in the chat box, and if you're associated with an organization, if you could include that as well. Please mute your microphone if you're joining by phone, and also if you could turn off your video if you're participating online to save bandwidth. This meeting is being recorded and will be publicly posted to the publicinput.com/neighborhood plan amendment cases website. If you do not want your image viewed publicly, please turn off your camera. As you know, this property is in the South Congress Combined Neighborhood Planning Area, the West Congress sub-area. Jesse Gutierrez is the meeting facilitator tonight. My name is Maureen Meredith. I am the Plan Amendment Case Manager. Nancy Estrada is the Zoning Case Manager. The agenda tonight, I'll go over basic case information, guidelines for group discussion, how to participate in this process, why is there a plan amendment application, what is a future land use map, also called a FLUM. I'll do a brief presentation, then Amanda Swore, the applicant's agent, will do a presentation. Then we will go to Q&A. So the property addresses are 106 and 118 Redbird Lane. It's 0.5068 acres. The plan amendment case number is NPA 2023-0020.02. The project name is 106 and 118 Redbird Lane. The request is to change the future land use map from single family to mixed use. The associated zoning case number is C14 2023-0034. The proposed zoning change is to change the zoning on the property from SF2 NP, which is single family residence district standard lot district, to neighborhood plan to CS MUVNP, which is General Commercial Services District, Mixed Use Combining District, Vertical Mixed Use Building Combining District Neighborhood Plan for a multifamily residential and commercial development. Property owner applicant is RPC 106 Redbird Lane LLC, and Amanda Swore from Jenner Group is the agent. Guidelines for group discussion. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat at any time during this meeting. Please postpone general comments during the Q&A session. After staff and applicant presentations, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand symbol on the menu bar. Telephone participants will be able to speak during the Q&A session of the meeting, and we will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number. Attendees will be muted upon arrival and through the staff and applicant presentations. Then staff will open the floor to answer questions in the chat or by attendees raising their hands to speak. Similar questions may be grouped and answered together. If you're having connection issues, please turn off your video until called upon to ask your question, and we ask that you be respectful to each other during this meeting discussion. How to participate in this process. As I mentioned, the recorded meeting will be posted to the publicinput.com/neighborhood plan amendment cases website. You can email me or Nancy with any questions or comments that you have. If you provide written comments, we'll include them in the staff case reports. If you live within 500 feet, you will get a notice in the mail of the date and time of the Planning Commission and City Council hearings, and it will have instructions on how to participate in the public hearings, which will be both virtual and in person. The cases have not been scheduled for Planning Commission and City Council at this time. So why is there a plan amendment application? Neighborhood plans are adopted by City Council as amendments to the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. City charter requires zoning changes to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and most neighborhood plans are amendments to a plan's future land use map. Most neighborhood plan amendment applications have an associated zoning application. So this map shows the areas that have City Council approved neighborhood plans, which are the blue areas. All of these plans have a plan document that has a vision and goal for the planning areas, vision and goals, and also most of which have a future land use map. So the future land use map has these colors which represent broad land uses. For example, orange would represent multifamily, yellow represents single family, and mixed use is the brown color. So this applicant is asking for a change in single family, which is the yellow, to mixed use, which is the brown. And this is a close-up of the property. It's the plan amendment is this one lot going from request to go from single family to mixed use. That is the lot in an aerial photo. But the zoning change is a larger area. Here's a Google Maps that shows the property. And this just shows the single family lot there. And here is the future land use map showing the larger area of the zoning case. And you can see the majority of the property already has mixed use land use. And it's just this one lot that has a single family land use, which is part of the future, part of the plan amendment request to change the future land use map. Here's a zoning map that shows all of the areas within the zoning case. You can see the one lot that is SF2 and the rest of the property is CSMU, which is General Commercial Service Mixed Use Neighborhood Plan. So here is the Imagine Austin growth concept map, and these blobs of color represent regional centers, town centers, neighborhood centers, and activity corridors. So you see this property is adjacent to South Congress Avenue, which is a activity corridor, and you can see West Stastny Lane and South First are also activity corridors shown with the two brown lines running to the along the streets there. This map shows the property in proximity to public transportation. You see some running along South Congress, West Stastny Lane, and South First Street. That ends my presentation, and I will stop sharing my screen. And Amanda can start hers. You're muted.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Maureen. Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Swore with Drenner Group. Also here for the meeting today, we have Drew Rafael. He is also with Drenner Group and is helping run the application. And then I think I saw Francisco and Nicole hop on. I'm not sure if Nicole's still on with Rastigar. They are the property owners. So I do have a brief presentation that I would run through, and then we are happy to answer any questions. But most importantly, thank you so much for being here this evening. See if I can get this to share. Teams has not been my friend today. Just here and can you see that?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Again, my name is Amanda Swore, and the property that we are talking about today, the zoning case name is 5402 South Congress Avenue. Here this evening to talk about the neighborhood plan amendment and the zoning case. And somehow it's already the 15th of May. So a lot of the beginning of this is what Maureen covered. So I'll run through relatively quickly to get to the overall property details. So as Maureen said, this property is located north of Stastny on the west side of Congress. Zooming in a little bit better, you can see that it's really 5 parcels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all cumulatively owned by Rastigar Property Company, and they are looking at moving forward with a redevelopment on the site. The property today is 2.72 acres, again, is 5 parcels. The majority of the property is undeveloped, with a portion of it being automotive sales and then a portion of it having a single family structure on it. As Maureen also mentioned, the property is on a core transit corridor, which is an important component of a redevelopment. It's on an Imagine Austin corridor and in close proximity to both transit as well as greenway and trail areas. The key piece that I really want to focus on is why we're asking for the rezoning, in addition, the neighborhood plan amendment component, and really kind of how they all fit together. So as Maureen mentioned, we are only asking for a future land use future land use plan amendment on the small portion that has a single family designation on it today, and then a larger rezoning on the remainder of the property. The property that is zoned single family is, like I said, is owned by our clients and has always been envisioned to be incorporated within the larger redevelopment of the property. The city legal department recently, in the last year or so, has changed their interpretation on how you can incorporate property into your own site development permit. And I won't get too far into the details, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. But they, to be able to incorporate a single family zone property into your own property and not trigger compatibility standards on yourself, the lot actually has to have infrastructure on it. And so with that change in interpretation, we are seeking to rezone the property so that we have a unified set of site development standards and regulations on the property. And in order for us to be able to submit and process a rezoning application, we had to simultaneously submit and process the future land use map amendment to really be able to create the comprehensive district on the proposed development site. So again, just the future land use map amendment on this small portion of the site to make the comprehensive, my kids would call this a rhombus, have a singular mixed use designation, and then the associated rezoning, which will zone the property from the alphabet soup here to CS, which is the general commercial services mixed use, vertical mixed use, conditional overlay for a portion of the property, and the neighborhood plan combining district. We did incorporate a conditional overlay in our initial request on the portion of the property that had a conditional overlay today. So this lot that fronts on Mockingbird had a conditional overlay that had two items in it. One was a 30-foot vegetative buffer that set off from the adjacent SF6 zoned property. And it also had these uses that are listed right here, the pawn shop and general automotive uses that were prohibited on the property today. We carried both of them forward. One of the questions that I have received is, why is there a vegetative buffer here and not on the southern portion of the property? And the answer to that is because the SF6, I didn't do the initial rezoning, so my best guess is that the SF6 NP, because of the designation and the use as a higher density residential use, it does not trigger compatibility standards. And so that is why the vegetative buffer was put into place. The property to the south, or along Redbud Lane, the adjacent property here is zoned SF2. So compatibility standards, which provide the same and actually greater bufferings than the vegetative buffer, will apply on the southern piece of the property. So showing that a little bit differently, this SF2 zoned property today will trigger compatibility standards on any new development on this site that is something that is greater than single family. What compatibility standards do is create setback and height modifications, step backs, I guess is really the best word, to provide that transition. So the compatibility rules that will apply to this site, given its location on the corridor and the proposed vertical mixed use designation for the property as a whole, are they provide 100-foot modification in allowed height. So for the first 0 to 25 feet, this is a no build area. No structures are allowed in this setback area. Between 25 and 50 feet, the maximum height that is allowed in this area would be a structure that is 35 feet in height. And then between that 50 and 100 feet back, the maximum height that is allowed in that 50 feet is 45 feet in height. And once you get past that, you would be allowed the maximum height that's allowed in your zoning based district. So taking the next step, what we are proposing on this property is a mixed use project that would have approximately 250 multifamily residential units. It is anticipated to develop under the vertical mixed use overlay. At this point, we are anticipating a VMU1 building versus a VMU2 building. With that, a minimum of 10% of the units in the property would be allowed to, or would be required to be reserved for households earning 60% of the median family income. I see the question in the chat, so I'll just go ahead and answer it. With a vertical mixed use designation, maybe I'll just flip back. The question was, what is the maximum height allowed? And the CS zoning that exists today has a maximum height allowed of 60 feet. That is what is allowed under a VMU1 building, which is what we were proposing. If a VMU2 building were to be sought, the maximum height for that type of a project would be 90 feet. It does come with an additional affordable housing requirement. Again, at this point, we are seeking a VMU1 building that has the 10% of the units at 60% of the median family income. A couple of changes that came with the newer vertical mixed use regulations adopted by the city council is that those affordable units are required to be a mix of the units on the property. So the affordable units must match the overall unit mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units and efficiencies if that is part of the pro forma. And those units are affordable for a term of 40 years. The vertical mixed use overlay does require ground floor pedestrian oriented space along South Congress. We anticipate that with the length of this, that would be approximately 9,600 square feet of ground floor. Oh, goodness gracious, I'm sorry, of pedestrian oriented uses. I want to take a second to talk about one of the items. So we have met briefly with the neighborhood plan contact team, some of their representatives prior to this meeting wanting to just start a conversation. We have also sent letters to all of the neighbors within 500 feet of the site providing our contact information. Some of the questions that we got with was regarding some additional prohibited uses that would be anticipated on the property. I'm happy to talk through those, but if there are specific uses that the neighborhood or neighbors want to ensure are no longer permitted uses on the site, we are happy to entertain those and include those as a potential conditional overlay on the site. And we have also gotten some questions about, sidewalks and how those will be utilized in the future if a new sidewalk will be constructed along South Congress. And the answer to that is yes. With the vertical mixed use project, you are required to build elevated sidewalk and landscaping standards along South Congress. We also received a few questions generally about how does the construction process work? Where is construction parking? Is construction parking allowed on right of way? And we are happy to dig further into those questions as part of this conversation, but wanted to address them generally that there will be designated both on-site and off-site parking for construction workers, that parking will not be allowed just along the right of way and specifically along sidewalks. And so with that, I'm happy to stop and answer any questions that there might be.
Thanks, Amanda. There was a question from Cody Carr. Why did RPG abandon their original proposed site plan from 2021? It's in the chat.
Thanks. When I have this up, I can't always see all of the chat. Francisco, do you want to answer that question, or you want me to take a stab at it?
I can answer it, Amanda.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. The reason Rastigar Property Company took a different approach from what was proposed in 2021 to what we are seeking is just a change due to, I'm trying to find the right word, the marketing that was able to be proposed. So originally we were looking into doing a co-living concept here, which is essentially housing for young adults transitioning from perhaps university into their adult life. And we saw that this perhaps wasn't the best location to do that, since it is pretty far away from the Austin core. And you typically see projects like this closer towards a university campus. So you could see some co-living near UT or even in larger metropolitan areas like New York or California. You see it closer to larger metropolitan areas. We just looking at some market research, looking at some of the comps in the area, we just thought that transitioning over to a traditional multifamily made more sense for this area. Cody, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I guess a follow-up question also from Cody, what's the difference in total unit count from that 2021 site plan to the new proposed site plan?
Sure. So the unit count we had for the co-living concept was close to 90 units. But those 90 units had a combination of different bedrooms, so that bedroom range changed from studios to 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. So again, that was a co-living concept. So just imagine having 5 roommates in 1 unit. So that's why the unit amount is lower, but the actual bedroom, which was what was going to be leased, was a bit higher. So ultimately, it's pretty comparable from what that was to what it is today. It is just a difference of the actual units themselves.
I think that's an important point to just re-highlight, Francisco, is that in general on co-living projects that I have worked on, and frankly, the Austin market just isn't quite there yet. The co-living concept is really starting to transition in some of the larger metropolitan markets. But when you have the co-living concept, you end up with projects that are 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms. You don't end up with studios and 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. You have the concept to that is a multi-bedroom, similar to like you would have had a dorm in college, coming out and you lease your individual room as part of a larger unit. So I think that's an important from a density standpoint. To Francisco's point, while the number of residential units sounds higher, the actual number of bedrooms is lower.
John E had a question in terms of for this plan, how much parking is being considered?
In this instance, so one of the things that the vertical mixed use overlay does is it does allow you to park to market and or reduce parking. In this project, all parking will be structurally parked and internally wrapped within the project. I do not know off the top of my head the exact parking ratios, but they are today prescribed by code, even though there are some proposed code modifications in the works.
There's a point of clarification or asking for clarification from Gwen. Sidewalks and landscaping should also be provided along Redbird and W Mockingbird. Amanda's presentation did not infer that would be included at developer's cost. Please clarify.
So what I mentioned was that South Congress, as part of the vertical mixed use overlay, has enhanced sidewalk and landscaping requirements. You end up with larger sidewalks along South Congress, but yes, sidewalks would be required along Mockingbird and Redbird, pardon me.
Okay, another question from Cody. Will the new proposed building have a rear-facing porch at 60-foot height?
So I guess the question is, would there be rear facing units? And I don't know the answer to that. I would assume that the answer is that the units would wrap the property, but the maximum height would be 60 feet. Francisco, I don't know if you want to chime in on that anymore.
Yeah, I think as of today, it's too preliminary for us to tell whether there are units that will be facing inwards. Typically in this kind of construction or this type of project, you have a courtyard. So if a courtyard is to take place in this design, would have some units facing that courtyard. But most of the units priority would probably be facing Mockingbird, South Congress, and Redbird, with a few facing the inner courtyard.
Yeah, another question is, as far as transportation engineering and street parking on Mockingbird Lane, I guess what's the vision for that? Will it be inundated with cars?
So Francisco, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, we don't know all of the details yet, but we do know that the reality is that driveways are not likely along South Congress. You will likely have an entrance to the parking garage, likely from Mockingbird, but all parking for the project is anticipated to be internal to the structure, and wrapped and screened by the units. And internal to that, there not only is that where the resident parking will be, but that is also where the commercial parking would be. So no on-site or on-street parking is intended to count towards the project. We will have to meet all of our parking requirements internal to the site. I think that was the question. And if I didn't answer it correctly, feel free to, you can also, if you want to, and if it's easier for you, you can chime in and ask the question verbally in case I'm not getting it quite right, just from a reading it perspective.
Yeah, Amanda, that is correct. The goal is to have internal parking, and not street parking through Mockingbird, Redbird, or South Congress.
Okay, another question from Cody. When will the neighbors get to see the basic site plan layout of the new proposed concept?
You're working fast and furious on that, Francisco. I don't know if you have an update. I haven't seen it, but I know that that's kind of what we've been working through.
Yeah, our as of lately, right now, we're seeking proposals from architects for us to be able to, get the conceptual land plan started and space plan that in a site plan. But at the moment, we don't have that ready yet.
Okay, another question from Cody. Will it be helpful to RPG for the neighbors to write a letter to ATD in support of an entrance and exit on South Congress?
It really depends on how what ATD is gonna do on any given day. I know that South Congress has been part of several different corridor plans. Realistically, at the time of zoning, ATD is not looking as much at transportation. They've really kind of focused most of that to the time of site development permit, when we know exactly, what densities are and those type of items. I do not think it hurts in the slightest, but I don't anticipate the city allowing a driveway cut on South Congress. That's been my experience over the last several projects that I have done in this area. They have really focused that more from a public transit and a pedestrian perspective.
Okay, Mario Cantu had a request. Can we make sure that the existing structures on the property are secured and that no trespassing signs are present? That grass is cut and maintained. This is to keep homeless use within the current property. Oh, yeah.
Amanda, I can answer to that.
Yeah.
Mario Cantu, we are doing our very best to keep that property cleaned. It's very difficult to keep unhoused neighbors out of the property. We are doing our best, and we've received calls from adjacent neighbors and businesses just wanting that area to keep clean. So we are sending landscape company out there twice. I believe it's twice every 2 weeks, so 4 times a month to trim grasses. A perimeter fence is something we can look into. But again, I think we've done a pretty good job cleaning up that area compared to where it used to be a couple of months ago.
Thanks, Francisco. From Gwen, another question. Stasny to Ramble is a dangerous section of South Congress due to narrowing of the street. How will traffic be managed?
As I said a second ago, traffic is really handled at this point in time under current policies at the time of site development permit. That is when the city will determine. So the city has determined that a zoning transportation analysis, which is kind of what they are doing in some instances, if you exceed certain thresholds, is not required on this zoning case. So with zoning, transportation is not conducting any type of analysis, but they will, at the time of site development permit, still be looking for mitigations, analysis, etc. But they, for the most part, do not do full TIAs or anything along those lines at the time of zoning anymore.
Yeah, so this might be a similar question to that you just answered, Amanda, from John E. So yeah, will the city conduct a TIA in regards to Bluebird and maybe also Redbird, Mockingbird?
Not with zoning, no, sir, but at the time of site development permit, they will look further into transportation, and all projects are required to provide transportation mitigation with the current city regulations in the form of street impact fees. And at the time of site development permit is where the city will conduct any studies that are necessary, and they will determine where those mitigation dollars are allocated.
Thanks, Amanda. Cody has a question. What types of businesses does ownership imagine will occupy the ground floor development?
I would guess Francisco's going to tell you that it's too early to determine, but what I can tell you is that with zoning and the CS base district, it does allow for all kinds of pedestrian oriented uses in that area. Francisco, I don't know if you have anything more specific, but I know that it does. The requirement is that those spaces have to be built out to meet ADA requirements and to be accessible for any of the uses that are permitted in a CS, and they have to be parked to commercial standards. So a lot of times you can see anything from neighborhood office type uses to, you can see restaurants, you can see professional services, personal services, etc. I'm not sure if there's something that y'all are targeting, but all of those are possibilities in that area.
That is correct, Amanda.
Another question from Gwen. How and where will stormwater retention / detention be planned?
That is for an engineer, which is way outside of my wheelhouse. And I don't know anything about this site, Francisco, because it hasn't come up from a stormwater perspective. But at the time of site development permit, that is when all stormwater detention, retention, water, and wastewater analysis are performed, and that is where you have to show that you are both maintaining all of the existing, like you can't make it worse, right? That's when we have to show that we are handling all of our water and that we're not having an adverse impact and or leaving it better from what's on the ground today. But that is all done at the time of site development permit, Gwen.
Okay, another comment from John E. And John, if you want to speak, feel free to as well. But I can go ahead and read it if that's okay. Yeah, I'll just read it. So most of Redbird has no parking signs. And so what I'm most concerned about is parking spilling out onto Bluebird and Mockingbird. These neighborhood streets are level 1, no sidewalks and pretty tight, and weren't meant for mixed-use traffic. And when I say parking spilling out, I'm talking in large part about sagebrush parking, which is currently using the vacant lot on the corner of Congress and Redbird for parking.
This is definitely a piece that Mario and Gwen brought up to us when we had an initial high-level conversation, which we were very grateful for. We do not, and Francisco, again, chime in if you disagree with anything that I'm saying. But in general, for us to have a project that is marketable and works, we have to be able to provide our own parking on site. And so this is the type of project where if I live on the 3rd floor, I drive to the 3rd floor and I walk directly into my unit. So it is a garage that is big enough so that if I live on the 4th floor, I can drive all the way to the 4th floor. Once you start building these projects and constructing the parking, it doesn't make sense to go to underpark them. And so what we anticipate is fully parking this to market with ample space for the residents as well as the commercial uses. We do not anticipate kind of the spillover parking. And then with regard to the level 1 streets, the project would be required again to install the sidewalks on Redbud and Mockingbird adjacent to the property. And feel free, like if I'm not answering y'all's questions, please feel free to come on, like to unmute and chime in on it or to raise your hand. I hope that I'm doing my very best.
Yeah, everyone is welcome. Everyone's welcome to raise your hand and ask questions. Oh, John says thanks for reading that comment. Appreciates it. Okay. From Mario Cantu, Francisco, please place no trespassing signs on the structures and register with APD for no trespassing. Another comment from Mario. We need a plan for construction workers parking. We do not want to see the neighborhood used as a parking area.
That is definitely something that we have talked about internally as a team, and we'll make sure that it's handled. There is no intent that there be. Nobody wants to have on-street parking during construction where people park blocks and walk. There will be, as I mentioned as part of the presentation, there will be both on-site and off-site designated parking for construction.
Another comment from Mario in the chat. Also need to consider light pollution within the neighborhood from any garages and structures.
That's a really great point. So this property will have to meet all of the city's lighting requirements. The garage will be fully screened internal to the building, so you won't have excess light pollution from cars getting to their designated spaces, locations, etc. The only external lighting will be, building lighting. That lighting is required to meet all of the city code requirements. And in this instance, lighting is required to be fully hooded and fully shielded, specifically with the single family that is to the west, meaning that we cannot have, our lights can't cross over the property line. So it can't be lights that shines like this. It has to be lights that have a hood on them and a shield on them that, they come down the building, etc. They can't provide light pollution out past our property line.
Cody has some questions around community benefits. What types of improvements to the local community or amenities are proposed, if any? Will there be any benefit to the neighbors?
Again, great question, and really why we start having these types of conversations. I know in working with the contact team, we have been able to come up with items and ideas that are important to the community. One of the biggest things so far that we've heard on this is really ensuring a seamless process. The questions that have come up to date have really been regarding the uses that they don't want to see coming back on the property, that we are amenable to eliminate, as well as handling all of the construction aspects. But we are more than happy to have an offline conversation. We've also had some general conversations on making sure that there are, dog walking areas within our property, so that these areas that doesn't spill out into the community. We've also, talked about how, parkland is handled, how you can incorporate maybe some items into some of the setback space. So the project is not fully designed, definitely open for hearing kind of how this property can partner with both the adjacent neighbors and the neighborhood as a whole.
Great. John E. has another question. Is there any agreement or conversation with Sagebrush for parking in the garage?
Not at this point. That is something that Weed Runner had a brief conversation with Rastigar on. At this point in time, I would say that the project is not far enough along. There's also, safety concerns with allowing the integration of parking. So we know we need to make sure that we handle our parking and that our residents have a safe and secure environment for that. So at this point in time, there is not there haven't been any kind of conversations. In all reality, we learned, about the expanse of the problem about 2 weeks ago, maybe.
Okay, another question, question in the chat from Mario. We would consider a penalty if we see continued faults from the designated construction company. Jordan Foster, question mark?
We do not have a construction company on board at this time. There's not a general contractor. I'm sorry. Let me scroll to that one. Sorry, we would consider a penalty. That's something that we're more than happy to talk about. Again, Francisco, they're local. They're Austin folks. They live here. They own this property. They own several other properties. Want to make sure that they are good neighbors. Happy to talk about kind of what that looks like, but they want to set everything up to be as successful as possible. At this time, there's not a construction company. And Francisco, chime in if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
that was my understanding.
No. Amanda, that is correct. Right now, typically we would choose a construction company once we have a design for the project. But when we do select a general contractor, we will make sure that we are parking where we need to park and not parking in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and what we have really found some success in doing, and really it started with a suggestion from this contact team several years ago, is as things move forward, making sure that, once we are out of the picture, that you have a designated contact, somebody that is part of the project, someone that is here and local and reachable through, from day one to day, delivering up the project, that if there is a problem, you're not, searching around on site trying to find somebody, that you have a designated person that you have a phone number to and can reach out for immediate resolution.
Yeah, and Amanda, just to kind of expand on that, I can make myself available. I've provided my information to Amanda. Amanda, feel free to distribute that as needed to the neighborhood association, but I will be the point of contact.
Okay, question. Can you confirm RPG is no longer using Domus Studio as the architect?
At the moment, we are considering using Domus as one of the architects, but we are changing the project as previously mentioned, or that is our aspiration. And they are one of the architects that will be bidding or submitting a proposal for this new typology.
Okay, another question from Gwen. There was something in an earlier slide regarding the trailhead. Is there some benefit to the trail by this project?
The property has not yet submitted a parkland early determination to talk to the Parks Department on kind of where they see needs, etc. I would not anticipate this project having an on-site parkland dedication. What we tend to like to do is work with the neighborhood if there are specific items that they would like to see the parkland dedication dollars that are required with the development go to. We have seen some success in working together to both petition that our dollars go to a nearby, a trailhead, a park, etc. to the city has the ability to spend them within a certain radius, but if you want it, it's usually beneficial if we voice this a desire for specific dollars to go to a certain place. So, Gwen, that's something that we'd be happy to discuss if the trailhead is a place that makes sense to prioritize, or if there's something else in the area.
This might be a good follow-up to that from Cody. What would you offer as an example of partnering with the neighbors?
That has been definitely one of the things that we have seen. We've seen, really, if there's identified projects, etc., kind of seeing if there's a way to help get funds that the project is paying to go that direction. All kinds of different options. Cody, it's, we've seen things from hey, we need to make sure that we have, like I said, an on-site dog waste facility, right? There's all kinds of different things that have been and can been proposed. We've had projects where it makes more sense and it really would work a lot better if we moved a bus stop, that we petitioned to work on that, or this bus stop needs, benches. It really is, it's an open conversation.
The next question from Johnny, and John, you might need to come off mute for this one, because I think he wants to talk a little bit about the sagebrush parking situation.
Yeah, and I'm reading the comment says expanse of the problem regarding sagebrush parking. We were really just we were told that there is parking in Gwen. Mario, you might be able to say it a little bit better than I can. I was just kind of relaying what we heard, but understanding that that when sagebrush is busy, that they do have not necessarily adequate parking on their site. If how they're working on addressing it, but that they are, parking more into the neighborhood, was brought up to us, and to ask if we intended to make sure that we had adequate parking. And as I've mentioned, that is, we 100% will handle all of our parking on site, without exception.
And Mario wants to know if Francisco is going to be the point of contact before, during, and after construction.
Yeah, I think that probably was in the chat before we scrolled down that far, but yes, sir. Francisco will be your point of contact, both concurrent with me during zoning and then during and after construction.
And someone who showed up a little late has a question. Not sure if this has been discussed due to coming in late. Is the development in discussion at all with the city regarding Project Connect, with the station being planned for Stasny and Congress area?
I did mention the corridor aspect of this. Really, that is all handled at the time of site development permit. So to be able to ask for the vertical mixed use overlay, we do need to be on a core transit corridor, which this project is. In addition to that, we do anticipate that as part of the site development permit, that we will work with the corridor planning office to determine, that's when we look at what right-of-ways look like, what, where are the pedestrian zones going, where are the bicycle zones going, are there any enhancements needed for the stops, etc. So not typically handled at zoning, but definitely a piece of the puzzle that we are aware of, and that will be talked about during the site development permit process.
Okay, and then Cody added a couple of elevations, maybe from the previous project in the chat. Just views from Mockingbird, yeah, previous plan, Congress view. Maybe question coming. See some typing.
The infamous ... right?
Mm-hmm.
And while Cody's typing, I will just make sure that I reiterate, we are here. We are very local. This is the city's required meeting, but as we, sent out the original letters, we don't anticipate this being a one-time conversation. We anticipate there being multiple conversations as we go through the rezoning, and then a continued relationship as they go through the building process in the future.
Yeah, and Cody, feel free to come off mute if you want to ask conversation. Mario dropped a comment in the chat. We need to make sure the commercial is affordable.
Yeah, Cody, I I cannot speak too much about market and what affordable is for commercial spaces, but I will say that we will go with what our market rent rate is at the time. And again, as Amanda pointed earlier, our hope is to get, make it general enough to where it could be an office use, it could be retail, it could be a restaurant, a coffee shop. And we're hoping to bring that into the project. not only for the residents of the project to use, but obviously for the rest of the neighborhood, which would be a good anchor or a series of anchors to the South Congress portion.
It does no good to have empty space.
Yes, that too.
Right. Cody dropped a comment question or two. First one, he or she would like to see RPG propose some ideas for partnering with the neighborhood, maybe 2 to 3. And also, will RPG develop this full cycle or possibly sell prior to construction? In the event of sale, will RPG intro to neighbors?
Let me answer the first piece of that. Absolutely. Like we said, we've definitely worked with this contact team and really look forward to working with the individual neighbors. More than happy to kind of brainstorm and pop through that offline. And then Francisco, I'll let you answer the second piece.
Cody, at the moment, we don't plan on selling the project. Our hope is to be the developer from the beginning of the construction until the end. These kinds of projects we typically hold for 5 to 10 years. In the event that we do sell the project post construction, we will definitely introduce the new owners to the neighborhood.
Mario has a comment about commercial spaces. We are seeing empty commercial in our area due to rent costs that was promised to us. Rental property is dormant.
I think that
Yeah,
goes
Cody,
to what Francisco said, is that it does no good for us to keep it empty and just shell space. So definitely want to work in every way that we can to make this a vibrant part of the community, not just an empty ground floor.
absolutely. Thank you, Cody.
My contact information, I think Maureen put at the beginning of this. I'm happy to throw my email and an office line in the chat, but feel free. Like I said, this is the beginning of a conversation, not a one-time conversation.
In the meantime, I'll go ahead and put up my slide and go over what the next steps in general will be. Let's see. Well, I think I closed out my presentation. Hold on.
Yeah, we got one more question from
Okay.
Gwen. She just wants to make sure that and confirm that 60 feet is the max height with the proposed zoning change.
So with the changes in the regulations, the property today has 60 feet in height with the CS. With the vertical mixed use overlay and developing under the vertical mixed use 1 regulations, the height is 60 feet. There is, with the addition, with the change with staff, there's not 2 separate zoning cases between a VMU1 building and a VMU2 building. So technically you could opt to a VMU2, which is up to 90 feet. That is not the intent in this case. The intent is a VMU1 building that has a maximum height of 60 feet.
I'm sorry, it's just easier for me to ask.
Yeah. So thank you.
So once the zoning change is approved, though, the zoning change does not restrict you to the VM1 versus making the switch to the VMU2, right? Or do we give approval for only one or the other?
They are tied together under the new code.
So that means you could switch after the zoning is changed?
I mean, theoretically, you could. Yeah, I can't sugarcoat around that. That's the way that the new code is put together, is that if you have a V, you can opt into the VMU1 program, but that you would have it's through the site development permit process, the requirements you'd have to meet all of the requirements. There are additional requirements to do VMU2, but you would have to meet those to be able to get the additional height.
Right, and the reason that I'm asking is more so for the immediate neighbors to the west, is because having that additional height for them is something, it makes a difference.
I understand. That's why we've been very clear that our intent is to develop under the VMU1. However, it is just one code designation. It's not like you can pick and choose like you might have been able to when they were talking about it. It's just if you have the V, it is both. There's not a V. It's not like we could zone to VMU1 or VMU2. The way that the ordinance was approved, they are together.
I understand that, and I'm in part asking if the team would be willing to sign a restrictive covenant or something saying that you're going with the VMU1 as opposed to the VMU2, so that the neighbors to the west would be assured, what's the height of the building that may be overlooking their property.
I don't think that's something I can answer on the fly, but that's definitely something that we can talk about offline and circle back with the contact team.
Okay, any more questions? If not, Maureen could maybe give next steps.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm the plan amendment case manager and Nancy Estrada is the zoning case manager. After this meeting, I will meet with my long-range planning team and we'll make a recommendation on the request to change the future land use map from single family to mixed use on the one lot. I will pass this recommendation on to Nancy and she will meet with her zoning team and they'll make a recommendation on the proposed zoning request on the property. I don't know when this will happen. The planning contact team wants to periodically touch base with me, like maybe the end of next week or so. I may be able to give you an idea of when staff might have a final recommendation, although I know the zoning team is a little short-staffed and might take them a little bit longer. So once we finalize the staff recommendation, we'll work with the applicant on scheduling the cases for planning commission and city council. I will reach out to the planning contact team, let them know what date we're aiming at and what deadline we would need to receive their letter of recommendation to be included in the staff case reports. But like I said, it hasn't been scheduled yet. All that's up in the air. Feel free to reach out to me and or Nancy. Here's our emails. Just ask us updates periodically and we can let you know where the status of the cases.
Mario Cantu left a nice message. A really good neighborhood community meeting. The applicant had information for the neighborhood. Questions were answered. Thank you. Thank you, Mario.
And also friendly reminder, tomorrow morning, I'll have the recorded meeting posted to the public input website where the link was, where if you attended online. So if anybody was not able to attend tonight, they can watch the recorded meeting tomorrow.
Thank y'all for the time and the discussion and look forward to working with everybody as the project moves forward.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
Okay.